we've got the diff, the rear diff pulled out. We've drained most of the fluid out. And you can see I've got some of my favorite tools to work with are these little hook tools you can get at just about any hardware store. You pull all the internal gears out. They should just pop right out, no problem. So below here, this gear right here, there's a pin that runs this way across the shaft. We've got to remove the shaft so we can take that bearing off. We've got to do the same thing on the gear side, the drive side of this thing. To get that bearing off, we take off that gear, expose the pin. It's usually a pretty easy task. And just kind of work it real slow. There's the pin. Slide the pin across. Careful you don't damage the O-ring. For the most part, it usually pops right out. Sometimes you have to rotate it a little bit. Probably should have removed the gasket first, but there we go. So the pin's removed from the gear side, the drive side, and then it's simply pull the shaft out. There's your out drive shaft. There's your donut. And there's your bearing. That old bearing usually just pops right off. Like I said, I love my little hook tools. They work real well. Slide it off. Put it in the pile with the other stuff. Now we have some more cleanup. The diff case itself, you can see there's a little screw there. I like to pull that out. It makes it a lot easier to deal with this other gear that's in there. And since I have access, that gear usually pops right off. Rotate a little bit. Work that point in there. There it is. Now your pin's exposed. And there again, you got to slide the pin out. You want to be careful you don't tear up the donut. Align it with the hole, the access hole. Should just slide right through.
Right now, the type A skateboard race is taking place for adults and children alike. Caitlin Disney's going to give it a try. I hear she's getting back to Casey years. Yes, Caitlin. I am, and as you guys can see, I am decked out head to toe in protective gear. I'm that person who's obnoxiously decked out. I mean, if I fall flat on my face, at least I do have some protection.
Yeah, girl. And so far at this point, we're pretty
so many tools you need. I know. Sometimes the easiest tasks are a little difficult. We'll pull that pin out and we'll get right back to you. Okay, so after a bit of a struggle, I got the pin out. You can see the shaft is exposed, and there's another bearing that's got to be removed before we put the new one back on. So now that the pin's out, it came out through the access hole. Slide the shaft out. Simple operation. Again, the donut. Peel the donut out. That way you've got access to everything you need for cleaning. All these gears, the body, everything. I strongly suggest you clean that stuff up before you put new fluids in, and definitely before you put new bearings on the outside. This bearing right here should pop right off. Now we're ready for cleanup and the install of the yellow Boca bearings, yellow ceramics. needless to say, there's a lot of tools you need, and some of the most overlooked tools during the bearing changeout process are things as simple as toothpicks, Q-tips, obviously your wrenches, drivers. Gotta have a good clean work area, a little bit of extra protection sometimes with shop towels, and sometimes you need some cleaning fluid and more tools. Obviously, a lot goes into it, but you can make it real simple if you plan ahead. One of the things I emphasize the most is making sure the surfaces you're working with when you take parts apart out of your vehicle, clean the areas. Clean them before you start working on them, clean them as you're going, and then clean them again as you're going in. Your vehicle will perform a whole lot better and take a little bit of extra care. Okay, so we're ready to reassemble the rear differential. You can see the housing has been cleaned. The yellow Boca bearings are placed in their proper locations. So we're ready to reassemble. As you can see, I've cleaned it up a little bit. There's a little bit of residue left from some of the old fluids. Put the donut back in place. Insert the shaft. And the pin. Now for guys like me with big old Flintstone fingers, it's a little tough sometimes, but it's really relatively simple. And if you have the right tools, you can make it easy on yourself. Should just slide right in there like that. There you go. Then on top of that goes the gear with the keyway, and away we go. Now since this is a rebuilt diff, even though you've cleaned it, you've wiped it off real good, there's still a lot of residual left. Some folks would say you should put some oil underneath the gear, and this is pretty lubricated, and ultimately it will fill the entire compartment. Now, for the body, same thing. You got to put the donut in place. It's usually a pretty easy procedure. The shaft. And now the pin. Pin through the access hole. Sometimes you got to make sure that the donut's seated correctly. You can see I've kind of messed up that first seat. There we go. Alright, so we struggle a little bit. Try to line your holes. You're not chasing it like I always do. And we'll come back to that once we clean this mess up a bit. Okay, so I've gone ahead and got through my struggles with the pin. You can see I've placed the gear and filled it with a little bit of oil. Everything's locked in place. If you can see the white on the end of my tool here, I've added a little bit of Teflon tape to the grub screw that goes into the side of the diff case itself. That, for me, is a whole lot easier than some folks who like to use different kinds of silicone and that kind of thing. I prefer Teflon, so I'm just going to batten that down a little bit, make sure it's not too tight, It gives it a good seal. I've never had a leak problem with that, and you can see the excess pops right off. Alright, so we've got the diff body reassembled, and we've got the rest of the gears ready to go in. Everything's nice and snug. Now you can see, with a little bit of oil I added in there, it's already starting to fill the gaps and the voids inside the gear. Everything's rotating nicely. Everything's seated, seems to be seated pretty well. You double check, put your finger down on it. Now we fill the rest of the cavity with fluid. And on top we go. The gasket's fine. Double check that. Make sure we've got proper alignment on the holes. Simple alignment tool, toothpick. And we're aligned. I like to let it sit like this for a few minutes. Let all the excess oil that's in the screw holes, let that bleed out. Sometimes I help it along. Let it drain a little bit. Obviously we've got to wipe it down before we put it back together. But right now it's ready, except for the cleanup. It's ready for reassembly with the Boca bearing yellow seals. And we'll be back with the next segment.